the world. Our guest speaker today is Dr. Cyrille Cohen, a world-renowned expert in the field of cancer immunotherapy and a shining star among the many accomplished educators and researchers at Bar-Ilan and beyond. From the beginning of the pandemic, Bar-Ilan went into military-style action and has been going from strength to strength. In that vein, we are very fortunate to have with us today Professor Aryeh Saban, who is at the helm of the institution. Under his leadership, Bar-Ilan has flourished and grown both in size and in reputation. I think, from what I heard, I think we have just in the past year an increase of 2,000 students, and the reputation, we have many, many examples of success that is adding and letting people know who we are, adding to our reputation and letting people know who we are. Aryeh and his team responded immediately to the challenges of the pandemic, and within a week, the university turned into a 100% online institution. To give you a brief description of Aryeh's background, but I'd like to say brief, but it's still, there's so much, it's a long brief. Professor Saban was inaugurated president of Bar-Ilan in October of 2017. Having previously served as a phantom pilot in the Israeli Air Force, the fact that he's taller than the required height, than the maximum height, is a story by itself, and they had to adapt to him, but trust me, he was a pilot. He went on to earn a bachelor's degree in chemistry and a PhD in electrochemistry, both at Bar-Ilan. After a two-year postdoctoral stint at the U.S. National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Denver, Colorado, Professor Saban returned to Bar-Ilan to pursue his academic career, rising swiftly from senior lecturer to full professor. He served as a founding director of the university's Institute of Nanotechnology and Advanced Materials for 7 years, and was elected to the position of Vice President of Research in 2014. During the 62nd Bar-Ilan Board of Trustees spring session in 2017, Aryeh was unanimously elected, which with Jews is very, don't take that lightly, unanimously elected to be Bar-Ilan University's 8th president. Before I give you Aryeh, I'll just throw in one other thing that just happened 2 weeks ago. One of the companies that he started that turned into a startup in the field, a very interesting field of aluminum, I think batteries, aluminum and air batteries, went public on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Aryeh Saban, President, Professor Aryeh Saban.
Thank you Michael, thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm so happy to see you all around. I have to be very brief because the star of this event is actually Professor Cyrille Cohen, and his topic is very interesting. I will be very brief. Hopefully in other meetings I'll be able to say more. I just want to share with you some of the latest news here at Bar-Ilan. We give you a taste of what's happening. This is what happened to the number of students in the last 4 years at Bar-Ilan. And you can see we started with something like 16,000. We are now over 19,000 within a short period. And all this happened together with the increase of the income parameters of the students. So we get more students, but not only more, we get better students in the period. And the reason, part of the reason for that is enormous work done in different areas, but part of it is the student satisfaction, as appears on the right hand. It's in Hebrew, but it basically says that among Israeli universities, Bar-Ilan was the best in terms of student satisfaction. So that's part of the reason. And you ask me, if you will ask me what's the future, how is the future going to be? We just had an open day last week. An open day. Typically, we used to have people coming over to the campus, being with us. Since the pandemic is here, we are doing it online. We were used to getting 3, 4, 5, 6,000 people coming over here. Look what happened. Last Monday, 84,000 people visited our website. 13,000 people joined the lectures during the open day. More than 2,000 people registered on that very day. And if you want to compare it to what happened before, last May, 1,400 registered, same as on last February. There's a dramatic increase in the interest in the university, which is part of what's happening around here and part of the future. And hopefully this number, this increase of about 30% in interest will continue for the coming year. In terms of research, I'm showing you here a gallery of 4 people who just won an ERC grant. These are grants, the most important grants in Israel today, goes between 1.5 to 2.5 million euros each. From the left, life science, brain science, medicine, and engineering. Throughout the campus, we see excellent people. And if you go into the prize winners, which is another way to measure success, Professor Doron Urbach, energy. On the right hand, Professor Zalewski from engineering, the Dean of Engineering. And in the center, Bible studies, Tanakh, Ed Greenstein, who won the Emet Prize. I think that this represents...
Could you tell everybody what the Emet Prize is? Because that's like the Nobel Prize.
The Emet Prize is like the Israel Prize. It's like the level of Israel Prize. It's given by the Prime Minister. It's an extremely important prize given once a year to a very small selection of scientists and artists and educators. So it's like an extremely important prize. I will finish with this project that we are very much proud of. We just won a competition to be the host of what's called the PSIFAS, the Mosaic project. This is going to be the bank, the Israeli Reference Genome Bank in Israel. It's a 250 million shekels project funded by the government. There was a competition among universities, among Israeli universities, and Bar-Ilan. We won the competition to build the bank that will allow us to do what we call precision medicine, much better medicine for Israel and for the humanity coming out of Bar-Ilan University. I think it's enough for this presentation. Believe me, Professor Cohen is much more interesting. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Aryeh. Even though it's not on the agenda, but if anybody has a question at any point, I'd like you to look at the bottom of your screen where it says reactions.
Yeah.
And if you click on it, you'll see a thumbs up. If you look at my picture, it looks like this. And if you do a thumbs up, I'll call on you if we have the time, and but just to acknowledge you. Thank you. I now take pleasure introducing you to one of Israel's leading experts on the COVID-19 vaccine, Dr. Cyrille Cohen, who is interviewed by the media on a daily basis. And from what we just heard, not only a daily basis, but multiple media on a daily basis. Since the beginning of, and that's, I mean, I would imagine you live in that suit and tie with the amount of interviews you're giving.
I have a few different ties, don't worry.
Okay, good. Since the beginning of the pandemic, he has appeared frequently in both Israeli and international news sources, including the Times of Israel, the Jerusalem Post, Haaretz, ILTV, and ABC Sunday Extra, among many others. Professor Cohen sits on the National Virus Advisory Board and is well-versed in the benefits of the vaccine. His advice on this vital topic is highly respected and sought after in both the online and print media. Professor Cohen has been active in the field of cancer immunotherapy for the past 20 years. He is a member of the Israeli Regulatory Agency for approval of clinical trials based on gene and cell therapy, and of the advisory board for clinical trials on coronavirus vaccines at Israel's Ministry of Health. He was recently appointed as president of the Israeli Society for Cancer Research. His works have been quoted more than 6,000 times. He has authored more than 70 publications in peer-reviewed journals, and he holds patents in the field of T-cell immunotherapy. At the conclusion of Professor Cohen's presentation, we'll have some time for a question and answer session. Everyone will be on mute up to that point. So for those of you who have questions, please raise your hand via the Zoom control that I just pointed out on the bottom under reactions, or send a chat and I'll try to find the chat, and I will call on you and unmute you. Please, Dr. Cohen, welcome.
Michael, thank you so much. And Professor Saban, also, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to actually be with you tonight and talk to you. So shalom to everyone. And yes, what we're going to do, as you might have heard, I'm fulfilling different tasks in Israel, but the one we're going to talk about today is actually about COVID-19 vaccines. And I would like, of course, to take the opportunity to kind of give you a very short, I would say, summary of what we've been struggling with in the past year, but also to be optimistic, as I can say with a certain confidence at this point that we do see the light at the end of the tunnel, even if the tunnel is quite long. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the pandemics, what is a virus.
I'm listening to something online.
And
the Israeli Dr. Fauci, Cyrille Cohen.
Yeah, that's me. Thank you, but I'm not a Dr. Fauci.
Okay.
Okay. So could you please mute everyone, Michael? Thank you. So basically.
Yeah, by the way, just one thing, Dr. Cohen.
Yeah.
I did not use that phrase, and I personally think you are the Israeli Dr. Cohen.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Actually,
I would, and if you want to, we can call Fauci the American Dr. Cohen. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, no, please don't. You know, I'm originally, I trained at NIH. I trained with Steve Rosenberg in the field of
course,
therapy.
Of course.
And I have great respect for NIH scientists as being one of them, in the past. So thank you so much. So yeah, and we're going to talk about vaccines also, which going to be the main, I think, topic of today's discussion. So basically, I have to tell you the truth. A year ago, we didn't anticipate, what happened, basically. We were very surprised. I'll tell you the truth. We heard about, and I remember the day I heard about, that new flu, that new pneumonia in China. And I'll be honest, and I said that for the record, on record, and I said, I'm not that worried about that. The only thing I was worried about was that it was a coronavirus, because we knew corona from the past. And starting from that point, I would say beginning of January, we realized slowly that things are
You are in mute.
Yeah, okay. So I'm now unmute. So what I was saying is that, starting from that point, a year ago, we discovered that we do have problems, especially that we're talking about a coronavirus, and it went fast. It went quite fast because January, we understood that this new virus can cause a severe disease and can kill. In February, we understood that it is spreading very fast to all parts of the world. In Israel, we already had our first, exactly a year ago, actually, exactly a year ago, we had our first case. And then beginning March, you know, a lot of countries went into lockdown, including our country. And yeah, those numbers were, you know, kind of, you know, at the time worrying, but what we see today is much more worrying. You know, 11 months ago, we talked about 4,000 deaths. Today, we're talking about over 2.2, 2.4 million deaths. So no doubt that we have a problem, and it has reached, you know, every part of the world. We're talking about a real pandemic. Now, the origin is quite controversial because we do not know exactly what happened. I'm not going to go into, you know, a discussion about that. But what we know for sure is that this virus came from an animal, and we are used to that because those viruses can jump from animals, and especially from bats. Bats are really at the origin of a lot of, I would say, diseases, viral diseases we've been fighting, you know, in the past, I would say, 1,000 years. And we know that bats actually are really a reservoir for such viruses. And we were afraid because of the fact that, you know, in the coronavirus family, we have 7 viruses. I mean, at that time, we had only 6, with, you know, the SARS-CoV-2 being the 7th. 4 of those viruses, we're not afraid of them because they're cold. But we have 2 that started, I would say, quite severe diseases. One in the beginning of 2000, like, you know, 2002, which is a SARS. And it had a mortality rate of 10%. And then 10 years after that, we had the MERS, you know, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome virus that caused actually a 35% mortality. But since the number of people infected was quite low, there were only, I would say, a few thousand that died of that virus. But therefore, we were, I would say, concerned to see if that new virus is as virulent, as aggressive as the former ones. And it was not. And we thought these were good news, but it is not good news, because, let me put it in a simple way, because that virus can kill. Okay, we have a mortality rate in Israel of 0.7%. Around the world, it's around 2 to 3%. Because that virus is not that violent, what happened basically is that it can spread slowly into the population and then kill. And that's actually something that is worrying us. So a virus, as you can see, is like a little ball. And inside that ball, you have all the information to replicate that virus, the RNA of that virus, genetic information of that virus, and it is coated and protected by an envelope of lipids and proteins. And on the surface of that envelope, we have what we call spike proteins. You can see that this is a real picture, actually, of the SARS-CoV-2 virus causing the COVID-19 disease. As you can see, you see those spikes, you know, it's forming like a crown, and that's from there, you know, the name corona. Okay, we know that family from the 60s, actually. I mean, we know that they can infect human from the 60s, but we knew that family from poultry, from, you know, the first virus was identified in the 30s, like almost 100 years back. Now, these are actually real pictures. Those small yellow dots are actually coronaviruses infecting one lung cell. So you can see the size, you can understand the size. This is a very tiny thing, the coronavirus, but very deadly, as you can see. So basically, the principle of a virus is that it's not really alive. It needs our cells to replicate. So it will infect our cells using that spike protein. Okay, that those small proteins can attach to our cells, and by attaching, they enter our cells. They will use our machinery to replicate themselves into new viruses. So one virus infects one cell, and then at the end of that process, you have 400 new viruses that will burst out of that cell, causing damage, and will infect the neighboring cells. So that's the principle of that virus like many other viruses. And of course, infection is through respiratory tracts. Now, the immune system, of course, does not stay idle in that case and is trying to stop the spread of the virus. And it's doing that using two main arms. One, we call it cytotoxic T cells, which are the cells we really like in my lab because we've been working with those cells for almost 14 years since I opened my laboratory in Bar-Ilan University. And we really believe in the power of those cells fighting, for example, viruses and also cancer. This is a very auspicious day because we also, tomorrow, a patient will is supposed to get a treatment we have developed in my laboratory in collaboration with a local hospital here in Israel. So we really like those cells. These cells are very powerful. But on the other hand, we have also what we call B cells, not T cells, but B cells that can produce antibodies to neutralize that virus. So that's how I would say in the majority of cases, our immune system is fighting that infection. The point is that sometimes we can get what we call severe respiratory syndrome, severe pneumonia. And you do not need to be a radiologist to understand that, these are sick people. You can see it's very blurry compared to healthy people in which the lungs are looking quite, I would say, clean. Now, that virus, as I told you, is very particular in the way that it can infect people, but does not cause what we call a symptomatic infection, meaning that those people are asymptomatic. But on that scale, I would say, from asymptomatic, you can go all the way to, I would say, pneumonia, severe pneumonia, and what we are afraid of, what we call ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. In that case, the immune system is overreacting and is causing the secretion of a lot of fluids in the lungs, which are actually those fluids. Even if the virus is no longer there, those fluids are blocking, the oxygen to enter our lungs, and those people will drown inside their own fluids. They will suffocate and die out of it. So we need to find a way to stop that also, and this is in the part of the treatments that I won't, I might touch upon a little bit here in that slide, but I won't go into details because we're going to talk about, how to prevent that situation using vaccines. So, you have the remdesivir, which is, not the, it's not really an efficient medicine, okay? We have, if you want to fight COVID-19, you can use, antibodies from patients that recovered, or artificial antibodies, or even patients that were vaccinated with a COVID-19 vaccine in order to help them, stopping the virus. You can use other, I would say, treatments to stop some of the effects, some of the symptoms of that virus, like anticoagulant that will help, preventing, hypercoagulation in the bloodstream of the patients. Or also you can use steroids like dexamethasone to lower the inflammation caused by that virus and what we have just seen, the ARDS. But one of the other problems we just started to, I would say, realize is what we call long COVID. In a lot of patients, we do see that those symptoms can continue for weeks and even months. We're talking about cough, we're talking about fatigue, loss of smell. We're not talking about a day or two, but we're talking even of several weeks. And this is something that made us realize that this is not a simple cold. This is not the classical flu, as some would say. This is a very serious disease. Now, the only, I would say, and I'm talking as an immunologist, of course, by training for 22 years now, since I started my master's degree, or 24 years actually. The only thing that we can actually preconize and advise for is a vaccine in that case, because developing treatments will take a long time. And you cannot always predict, what will happen if you are infected. You don't want to wait for the treatment. You want to stop that virus from developing the disease and that you can do that using a vaccine. And we know that, we are all every day attacked by millions of bacteria and viruses, and our immune system is actually very fit to defend our body. As I told you, the immune system is a very complex, network of different white blood cells, but I want to focus, as I told you, on T cells and B cells, which are actually those cells that are leading the effort against viruses. And again, also just so you know, we are, in the developed world, we are used to that cancer is a real threat. And I've been working on cancer, for the past few, actually 22 years. Okay. During my master, actually, I developed a vaccine. I'm not going to go into details, but in any case, we know that cancer is a real problem, and cardiovascular diseases are a real problem in the Western world. But if you look at the rest of the world, infections are actually the #1 killing thing around, the developing world. So a vaccine, what is a vaccine? Basically, a vaccine is a substance, basically to train our immune system ahead of time so that it can develop T cells and antibodies, so that the next time we encounter the real pathogen, we'll be ready to stop it, okay, without this pathogen causing any harm to our body. And one of the best examples is smallpox. Smallpox is a threat that was eradicated from the world thanks to vaccination. That vaccination started more than 200 years ago with Edward Jenner, perhaps one of the first immunologists, that inoculated a young boy with liquid from the blisters from a person, milkmaid actually, that had, cowpox, a very close virus to the smallpox virus, and he actually saved that boy. And even at that time, this is a caricature from the time, you could see that people were very reluctant of getting his vaccine, claiming, the anti-vaxxer, movement already started there. Then people were actually claiming that if you get, Jenner's shot, Jenner's jab, you will turn into a cow. So it's not new. Pasteur, of course, Louis Pasteur was also one of the fathers of the, I would say, vaccines, some 100 years after Jenner. But what we have seen in the 20th century is an explosion, a real development in the vaccine field, and a lot of diseases that were really something that frightened parents, like polio, like measles, just almost disappeared from the world thanks to vaccination. It's amazing, tetanus and diphtheria. These are really an achievement for modern medicine. So today, where are we when we're talking about the coronavirus vaccine? We know that around 200 vaccines were developed or are being developed. We know that around 60 to 70 vaccines are now being tried on humans, and we already have vaccines approved under what we call EUA, Emergency Use Authorization, and those vaccines are really using a new technology. So you have the classical technology, the old technology, when you take the virus and you kill it, and these are what we call inactivated vaccines. You can take the virus and kind of attenuate its effect, and these are attenuated vaccines, but we do not like those vaccines for several reasons, and I won't enter, this is one of the class I'm teaching about vaccines in Bar-Ilan. It really takes 2 hours to understand the whole philosophy behind that, but basically we are now turning to new ways to vaccinate, to immunize people. And one of the ways is, of course, to take another virus and graft on that scaffold a protein from the pathogen, from the bad virus. So you take a good virus and you just add, one, I would say, ingredient from the bad virus. But another way we can do that is to use the genetic information or part of the genetic information encoding one of the proteins from the bad virus. So we do not inject any virus. We do not have any, I would say, risk to cause a disease. We're just taking a little bit, the information as to how to make a viral protein. We inject that, and that's what you're doing with Moderna, for example, and Pfizer. Pfizer has been the vaccine we are using in Israel. We have also some doses of Moderna. So we inject that in our muscle. Our cells are uptaking this recipe. They are making, you see, they are making the viral antigen, the viral protein, and then our immune system recognizes that as a foreign protein and can develop antibodies and T cells. And it happened quite fast. It happened within a year. And some people are criticizing that. How can you make a vaccine within a year? And truth is, we could. Not me, of course, but the scientists behind those vaccines could do that. You know, I'm at the, I would say, on the other hand, I'm looking at the data as I gather, and we are deciding in Israel if we're going to accept that vaccine or not. So our task is, I guess, a little bit easier than theirs, but in any case, within a year, we were able to approve, less than a year, to approve vaccines that were developed based on the fact that we had preliminary knowledge from other viruses like the SARS and the MERS, where to hit, what kind of antigen, what kind of protein we need for the vaccine. You know, a lot of money was invested. You know, the what we call the Operation Warp Speed actually injected a lot of money in vaccine development. We shortened the bureaucracy, I have to tell you. But also it's very easy to some extent to develop a vaccine and to try a vaccine when there is a pandemic, because every day, you know, between 300,000 to 500,000 people gets infected with this virus. So it's easier to test that than, you know, when you are developing a vaccine for a very exotic disease in which there are not a lot of daily cases. So basically, you know, we have different types of vaccines now available around the world. We have vaccines using RNA, like, for example, Moderna and Pfizer. And here, I think, Aryeh, we can mention that Moderna CMO will be awarded honoris causa in Bar-Ilan, I guess, in a few weeks.
No, by the end of May.
Okay.
Tal Zaks, the person who is responsible for the Moderna vaccine, will get an honorary doctorate by us, by Bar-Ilan. You are all, of course, part of this ceremony, and we're looking forward to see you there.
Yeah, so these are great news, I think, for Bar-Ilan. And also, as you know, we have those vaccines, and we have also vaccines that are based on viruses. Okay, so you take another virus and you graft on it an element, a protein from the COVID-19 vaccine, from the COVID-19 virus, the spike protein, namely. So this is the technology used for the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, for the Sputnik vaccine, for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and also for the Israeli vaccine that is in phase 2 right now, clinical development. In Israel, we're using another virus, a good virus, on which we grafted the spike protein from the coronavirus. So with each vaccine, we have a different logistics, and every vaccine has its pros and cons. With a Pfizer, for example, you do need, you know, to use deep freezing conditions like -70, which I think is equivalent to -112 Fahrenheit degrees Fahrenheit. For the Moderna, you just need, you know, -20 Celsius, which is I can't remember, you know, I can't make the calculation, but again, it's around minus something, -30, I guess, Fahrenheit. But for example, the AstraZeneca does not need, you know, it just need a regular fridge, which is around, you know, 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And the vaccines arrived to Israel after we took care of the logistics, and they were, I would say, received like, you know, a diplomatic corps here in Israel by the Prime Minister, the Minister of Health Minister, and those vaccines arrived here in December. Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister, was the first to get his vaccines in front of the cameras on December 19th. And then We started with our vaccination campaign. 2 weeks ago, we opened the vaccination campaign to everyone from the age of 16. And the numbers are looking good. I have to tell you, Israel is the leading nation vaccinating as many people as possible. With today, the numbers today are, we crossed the 4 million people being vaccinated in Israel, in a country of 9 million people. This is the best, I would say, the most performant country in the world in terms of the vaccination campaign. Thank God, Baruch Hashem, with almost 30% of the population that already got the 2 jabs. So we are continuing with our efforts to help people and vaccinate people. Really, the numbers are looking good. And when I say they are looking good, the vaccine is really effective. And when I say effective, we are seeing what has been seen in the clinical trials, around over 90%, okay, 94, 93%. Even now I have data just before the introduction. I got data from the Ministry of Health showing that we are really close to the 95% efficacy. And even if you get the disease, if you are in the 5% that got the disease, in most cases it's a mild disease. So these are fantastic numbers. And please look at that. If we're looking at the cases, the number of cases, we are seeing a drop, especially in the 60-year-old plus population, because it was the first population to be vaccinated in Israel. So we're seeing a real drop from the peak we had a month ago. Likewise for hospitalizations. Unfortunately, the younger population is still struggling with the virus because of the variant, the British variant. But nevertheless, that population now can get the vaccine. And just so you understand, today, if you get into an ICU for corona, there are almost no patients that are vaccinated, meaning that the vaccine can protect you from getting to ICU and can prevent death. So these are great numbers. We are also following what we call side effects. This is also very important because, there was not a lot of information from Pfizer. We knew what to expect, but again, in the phase 3 clinical trial, only 20,000 people got actually the vaccine. 20,000 people, this is what we are vaccinating in Israel in 2 hours. And they did, a clinical trial of 4 months. So we are following, the side effects, but so far, everything I can say is looking quite good. Now, our concern is, of course, the variants, the British variant, the South African variant, the Brazilian variant, the Californian variant. So these are, of course, spreading. Today in Israel, 90% of the daily infections are due to the British variant. But I would say the good news is that the vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, can protect from the British variant and also to some extent from the South African variant. So let's hope we will continue like that. One of the battles we are now, I would say, trying to fight is the battle against fake news, which is preventing from a lot of Israelis from getting the vaccine. There are a lot of fake news. I've been taking some actions against it personally by being interviewed, daily in different medias, and also collaborating with different associations, for example, in the Haredi world, to help people just understand, what the vaccine is and what are the benefits. I do think that the vaccine is a voluntary thing. You want to get vaccinated, you should. You don't want, I can understand, but at least do that with an intelligent, decision, with, based on facts and not, I repeat, fake news. We still have a lot of questions, or critical questions we need to answer. For example, how long the vaccine will be effective? Will it be effective against all the variants? Does it prevent transmission? Does it prevent infection? We do have, some preliminary results that it may lower the chance of transmission, but we are waiting for robust data. Is it possible to mix different types of vaccines when needed, etc.? So these are questions we cannot answer yet, but every day we have new data. So I want to thank you for your kind attention and just wish you a lot of health and happiness. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen, for your fascinating report and also the many contributions during these challenging times. I also want to thank the Israeli Faculty of Medicine, Bar-Ilan's top-ranked medical school in only in a very short time. I think it's been around already 8 years. How long has it been around?
No, at the end of this year, we celebrate 10 years. There will be a
10 years.
celebration for 10 years.
Right, but within those 10 years, we rank equally and above some of the leading schools in Israel. So we really, in a short time, have established ourselves, and we have a fantastic dean, also recruited by RA. So it's something to be very proud of. We now have some time for questions, but I'm going to take advantage of being the host and start, if I may, start with a question. I had a few questions, Dr. Cohen, but actually your last slide took care of most of them. Because you said we don't know, because you said we don't know yet. I was going to ask you, do we need a booster shot? I was going to ask you, how about the variants? I was going to ask you, how is the infection rate and so forth. So since you've given the answer, which is we don't know yet, it's a work in progress, I'll ask one general question. And this is not really a scientist, it's asking you.
Espera un segundo.
I'm asking you for your advice, which is after, and I'm myself, for example, having received already the second Pfizer, and I'm already 2 weeks past that. So I'm in the zone. I'm in the post-vaccine situation.
Yes.
How do I live going forward?
Okay.
And with all these unknowns, what is your advice? Variants, infection, and also, to me, the biggest question is, we even don't know the long-term effects of the virus. Please.
Yeah, we do not know the long-term effects of the virus. That's true. Now, regarding day-to-day life, I will stick to our policy, being involved at some degree with that. You know, in Israel, we do recommend to continue wearing masks. We do recommend social distancing. We do recommend all those until we get the answers. Okay, it's really work in progress, but it is also your health, and we cannot take, you know, any risks. So the good news is really that we believe that the vaccine is really protecting people. We had cases but you know, in terms of numbers, a very low number of people that got the 2 shots and that got hospitalized. This is true. This is true. But the majority are being protected, and you cannot know in advance if you are, you know, on that side or on the other side. So until we know more, and until more people are vaccinated, so that we can stop more or less the spread of the virus, I think that caution is advised.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen. Okay, I'm going to now call on people who are in the chat room. Rami, please unmute your phone.
Yes, sir. Hello. Hi.
You have a question. You have a question.
No, I do not.
Did you ask here? I'll tell you what your question says.
No.
Okay, so let's.
Hold on.
Sorry, that was another Rami.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Rami.
Let's move on because
Yes, Rami.
How about the protection against the Brazilian variant? If you know
yeah,
any
we
data?
don't know yet. We don't know yet about the Brazilian. You know, some studies are. You know, in Israel we do not have the Brazilian variant, so it's very hard for me to tell you what's going on. You know, I've been, you know, scrutinizing the literature, you know, every day, hoping to find some clues. But I think we're going to get some clues quite fast. I'll be honest. And the other thing you have to understand that even, you know, when you look at the studies, these are partial studies because they're only looking at one aspect of the immune response, meaning antibodies. They do not look at T cells. But again, we are still waiting for that. My guess is that it will protect to some extent. To some extent, the vaccine will be able to protect. But now when we say the vaccines, there are different vaccines. Which one? You know, we already know that the AstraZeneca vaccine is less protective against the South African variant. So again, it's going to take some time to get a clearer picture. Yes.
Thank you.
I have a question from Milton Zegerman, please.
Yes, you mentioned at the beginning of your talk that a lot of these diseases, the pandemic, starts from bats.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how many million people have died already worldwide? 1 million? How many we project at the end? 2 million? 3 million?
2.5.
Eradicate the bats.
What? Sorry?
Why don't we get rid of bats? Even though there's organizations that would be fighting it.
Yeah, no, listen, nature will find its way. I'll tell you the truth. And I don't know, if you start disrupting the bats, you will get something else in a few years. We have seen that in different countries where they, chased, for example, I don't remember if it was flies or mosquitoes in an African country, and they eradicated those, and then the fish started to die. Because they needed, so it's a chain, in nature. So I don't know if eradicating the population of bats is a solution, but we do, not me, but there are virologists that are chasing viruses, and that's how we know, by the way, that this SARS-CoV-2, or at least its ancestor, was already circulating 10 years ago in bats.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have a call here, a question for someone who wants to remain anonymous and asked me to read the question.
Yeah.
I believe that Dr. Cohen said that 0.07 deaths in Israel,
Yeah.
but 0.02 deaths in the world. Is that true? And if so, why?
Several reasons. Medical care in Israel is excellent. Our hospitals are trained to put people on respirators already in internal medicine units. You do not need an ICU.
No, but the question, Dr. Cohen, was based on a higher number, she thought, 0.07 versus 0.02.
0.02? What is?
Yeah, what is the deaths in the world? Do you remember the percentage?
Yeah, it's around 2 million, 2%, more than 2%.
Oh, 2%. So the question is answered. The numbers were wrong. Okay, so I'd like to call upon Hannah Valeria, please, with a question.
Hi, thank you very much for your talk. I want to ask about the Israeli vaccine.
Yes.
When will it pass the phase 3 trial, and when would it be available in Israel if it's proven to be effective?
Yeah, so right now we are in the middle of the phase 2. I cannot tell very much. What I can tell you is that we are waiting for the interim results in April, and then we'll be able to decide as the Ministry of Health what will happen after that. And hopefully, if we go into phase 3, it will be very difficult to do that in Israel because a lot of people are already vaccinated. So we will probably need to do the phase 3 clinical trial partially in another country or in other countries. So if all goes well, again, in April, we'll be able to decide if we go into phase 3. And if we go into phase 3, it will take 4 more months, I guess. My guess is so that we can get more results. And then perhaps at the end of the summer, we'll be able to say if we have a vaccine in Israel. But nevertheless, it is very important that we have our own infrastructure to develop vaccines in Israel, because we can never know when the next pandemics will hit.
So we have a question, please, from
Thank you.
Thank you, from Gail and Barry Cooper.
Yes.
Are you there, Gail and Barry? Well,
Okay.
I can read their question, which says, having received vaccinations with Pfizer and my wife had Moderna both doses,
Yes.
how could we be tested for antibodies? When and which test to demonstrate immunity?
Yeah, so basically, antibodies tests are nice, okay. You can test as soon as, 1 week, 1 to 2 weeks. I would say, you'd rather wait for 2 weeks after the second dose and do your serological test. The point is that even if it's negative, it doesn't mean that you are not protected, because, the serological test is testing only antibodies and not T cell. But on the other hand, if your answer is positive, meaning that you have a lot of antibodies, so these are good news.
I have a question, please, from Nicole Evans, please.
Yeah, and actually, I have to apologize, but that's going to be our last question. I have to leave you.
Hi.
Hi.
My question was, what is your perspective on pregnant women getting the vaccine?
Yeah. Oh, this is a tough question. So basically, it's a complicated question, and I'll tell you, we do not perceive that there is an extra risk to getting this vaccine. Depends on which vaccine, but I'm talking what we have in Israel, the Pfizer vaccine. On the other hand, we have seen lately, especially, we believe that it is linked to the British variant, more and more pregnant women in ICU, under respirators, under ventilators. These are very, 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 very tough, I would say, conditions, because the frequency of the disease in pregnant women is the same as non-pregnant women, but the severity of the disease is twice to 13 times more in pregnant women. So we are very afraid for them. We do not perceive that there is a particular risk in the vaccine for pregnant women, and therefore the recommendation in Israel is that you should get your vaccine after the first trimester, meaning the second and third trimester. But again, it depends. If you tell me that this is a woman that does not go out, that doesn't have any contact with people outside of her place, or on the other hand, this is someone with high blood pressure, etc., etc., it can complicate the picture. So this is a personal decision, and you should consult with your OBGYN. But in Israel, the recommendation is that from the second trimester, you can get, and it is actually a good thing to get the vaccine. But again,
But Dr. Cohen, I know you have to go, but within the same question, one woman did ask Dina, would you recommend the vaccine to women that are breastfeeding?
Yeah, we do not have problem with breastfeeding people. That's a recommendation. So I want to thank you for everything. And
Dr. Cohen, thank you very much.
And stay healthy. Thank you so much.
Amen.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today. This special webinar is part of a series in which we bring Bar-Ilan University live to your homes and share with you cutting-edge research, wide-range scholarship, and critical innovations. We will send you the recording of today's presentation and invite you to join our upcoming virtual events. Please mark your calendars for March 8th, noon, for a conversation with Dr. Ruth Kadari, Director of the Rachman Center for the Advancement of Women's Status. And I want to acknowledge the members of Fifth Avenue Synagogue who have joined us today, who know very well the late Rabbi Rachman, who was also Chancellor of Bar-Ilan. And this is a very important institute named after him, Advancement of Women's Status. I hope you will join me in supporting Bar-Ilan as generously as you can. Our support strengthens Bar-Ilan University's capacity to continue its critical work, and we thank you all in advance. You can visit us at afbiu.org/donate. With that note, I'll just turn to our CEO of the American Friends, Nina. Do you have anything you'd like to sign off and say, Nina?
I just want to thank everyone for joining us today and for joining us for all the other seminars and webinars that we've had before, really showcasing the wealth and knowledge of Bar-Ilan University. So thank you, everyone, and see you again.
And everyone stay safe. Everyone stay safe. Bye-bye.
Stay safe. Yes, please stay safe.
תודה, שלום, לילה טוב.
ביי ביי.